Hi, it's Michael. Today's topic is 5 essential points of a successful spiritual life. Please note, spiritual doesn't mean religious, even though spiritual can incorporate religious. That's up to each individual person. And successful means that these 5 points are so essential that without them one would very likely or most certainly for sure go astray, get lost. And being lost spiritually is one of the worst things that can be experienced. So in other words, incorporating all these 5 points that will be mentioned shortly is essential to successful, positive, and unfolding spiritual growth. And after mentioning the 5 points, we'll go through them quite quickly. There will be a little explanation for some of the points. So, point number 1 is the acceptance that the way you know yourself right now is not what you really are. Is the acceptance that the way you know yourself now and you think about yourself now is not what you truly are. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is seek higher truth and be open to it. Point number 2 is seek higher truth and be open to it. Point number 3 is be kind and considerate to all life as much as you can, including your own life. Be kind and considerate to all life as much as you can, including your own life. Point number 4 is acceptance that there is a higher power that is the source of all life. Acceptance that there is a higher power that is the source of all life. And the last point, number 5, is let go of what is false and embrace what is true. Let go of what is false and embrace what is true. So these were the 5 essential points of a successful spiritual life, so one doesn't get lost. And now a little bit of explanation to some of the points. To point number 1, that the way you know yourself right now is not what you truly are. The way you know yourself right now is based on intellect, thinking, and the 5 senses. And the Buddha calls the brain thinking the 6th sense. So it is based only on senses that are linear and that are tied to this physical world. So obviously it's going to be extremely limited. So you're not going to get a true picture of what's going on. To point number 2, seeking higher truth and being open to it, it's not just seeking higher truth and reading about it. Any sponge can do it, can soak in information, but being open to it, having the willingness to accept it, to incorporate it into one's life. Now, some higher truth is evident and it's easy to discern, and some may be more difficult to discern. And many times we don't know, we are presented with a piece of information and it sounds good, but we are not sure if we are being misled or if it's a really true, sincere, honest truth. The beautiful thing is, because of the source of life within us, when we are open to higher truth, when we set our intention to be open to higher truth, our inner source files the higher truth in a proper place for us to come to surface when we need it, when we are open to it. If we close ourselves to higher truth, if we wave it off, if we dismiss it, then this is not going to happen. We'll be close to it and it will not come through for us. So again, even if we don't discern it at the moment, we don't recognize it as a higher truth, when we are open to it, it gets filed inside of our inner being, and when the time is right, it comes to the surface, so it's not lost. To point number 4, that there is a higher power that is the source of all life. Whatever the higher power is called, the label doesn't matter as long as it's respectful and sincere. What matters that there is a trust, there is an acceptance that the higher power is, because it is the source of all life, obviously including yours. And people who close themselves to higher power, close themselves to life, close themselves to light, and they live in darkness or twilight, and out of it comes suffering and diseases and other problems. So whether you call the higher power the true self, God, Allah, Buddha, Christ, whatever you call it is irrelevant. What is relevant is the intention behind it, is the acceptance and honoring of it. And now a few notes to point number 5 is that letting go of what is false and embracing what is true. Now again, with some things this is quite obvious, and with some things it's not so obvious. So for example, and it's an easy example that comes to the head right away, is you read from a heart surgeon that one of the main things to let go of, to drop, is drinking alcohol. No alcohol. So this is a higher truth. So, and because drinking alcohol is a falsity, then one drops it right away and embraces higher truth, which is abstinence from alcohol. Similar with smoking or with taking drugs. The falsity is the smoking, engaging in drugs, and the higher truth is dropping the smoking, dropping the drugs, and so on. These were just some easy examples. And since these examples were given, then some people may say, well, I try to quit smoking or drinking or taking drugs and I can't, it's too strong. Now again, it's a falsity, but at the same time, what Dr. David Hawkins has taught, and what is obvious, that this personal will is very weak. The personal will is very weak and cannot really get rid of these bad habits by itself. It is the spiritual will that's immensely powerful and that can easily help overcome any falsity, any bad habits. But for a person to have this spiritual will available, one has to embrace, one has to accept that there is a higher power that is the source of all life, because the spiritual will comes from it. And Dr. David Hawkins liked to give the example of a person who says he cannot stop drinking or smoking, and then Dr. David Hawkins said, and if somebody puts a loaded gun to your head and says, if you light a cigarette, I'll blow your head off, are you going to light it, or are you going to resist the urge to light the cigarette? You're probably going to resist the urge. So it's not that you cannot, it is that you won't. You don't really have the willingness inside of it to drop the falsity, to drop the unhealthy thing. Also, it's worth of mentioning that there is a technique to help discern truth from falsehood. Dr. David Hawkins taught it. It's kinesiology, muscle strength testing. You can turn to his books and videos. You can search for Veritas Publishings, and you can find the videos and books there. Or you can find a doctor, a practitioner that performs neuro-emotional technique, NET, neuro-emotional technique, which is actually based on kinesiology, on muscle strength testing, and you can test the validity of truth and the validity of what is false and truth with neuro-emotional technique. And there aren't that many doctors that perform NET, but it's very well worth it to travel to one, even if it's a longer distance, because the revelations that come through NET and the help in removing neuro-emotional blocks, they can speed up your spiritual evolvement immensely and can save you maybe even a few lifetimes of work. And that's it for this talk. If there are any questions or comments, they can be left below the video. Wishing you a healthy and joyful life. Michael out.